Good morning. Today we can discuss about compensatory aspect of debt policy. Over the period of time, government borrowing as an instrument of fiscal policy has gained greater significance. Over the period of time, government borrowing several instruments of fiscal policy that taking debt from international and national. It is used in wider perspective from financing war expenditure to mobilization of saving for economic growth, for aiding monetary policy, and fighting inflation. It is a tool used for containing fluctuations in the business cycle. Keynesian theory advocates public borrowing as an effective tool for fighting economic depression when aggregate demand fails to accelerate employment and output. Yesterday we studied classicals were against government policies and debt policy, but Keynesian theory advocate public borrowing as an effective tool for fighting economic depression. The government, through its fiscal policy, aims for three development objectives, namely growth, poverty reduction, social inclusion, equity, and economic stabilization. Musgrave, he was one of the fundamental public finance economists. In 1959, has identified three rationale for fiscal policy. Three important rationale for fiscal policy. High employment and price stability require sufficient expenditure and demand to take high output of the market. It is difficult to achieve given the fluctuations in demand and economy prone to inflation or deflation. Then compensatory budget policy is one of the tools for stimulating aggregate demand. The government can aid in stimulating economic growth during the period of recession and depression by increasing its expenditure and thus achieving higher income and employment growth through the multiplier process. It can also to control inflationary and deflationary pressure in the economy. In the absence of any compensatory action by the government, the economy may move to underemployment. There are two variations of public expenditure. Pump priming. It refers to initial push provided to the economy through enhanced government expenditure. Initial push, first stage, provided to economy through enhanced government expenditure to develop, to increase the government expenditure. Government have so much money, so we have to take money. Then compensatory spending, it refers to the government borrowing to finance expenditure within the aim to compensate for decline in private investment. When sometimes private investment will be less, so government should encourage investment. At that time government spend more. That is compensatory spending. And growing public expenditure due to massive increase in government activity has meant growing gap between revenues and expenditure. This shortfall it met through rising public debt. An economy under depression faces low marginal efficiency of capital, low confidence in the economy, low aggregate demand, and thus low private investment. The government stimulates investment in the economy, stimulating the process of income generation through the multiplier process. In order to have an expansionary impact, public expenditure must be financed through borrowing. And sources of public debt. There are two main sources of public debt. Internal source. Internal debt refers to the government loans secured within the country from the public financial institution. The government raises loans through treasury bill, bonds, loans, etc. They are floated in capital market within the political boundaries of the country. Then individuals, banking, non-banking institution and central bank are the main source of internal borrowing. External source also, the debt incurred through borrowing of government from foreign government, international institutions such as World Bank, IMF, etc. And classification of the public debt. First, internal and external debt that we have already. When we are government taking debt from within the nation, that is internal, just we studied. Then external, taking from the international and other agencies and other countries. The next one is productive and unproductive debt. Productive debt is defined as a loan which is used for productive purpose, and it is used to add the productive capacity of an economy. Unproductive debt does not yield any income to government and are incurred to cover budgetary deficit and finance expenditure related to natural calamities, war, and other unforeseen events. It is also known as dead weight debt. Unproductive debt is also called dead weight debt, as it does not lead to any asset creation. It does not create any profit to nation. Then short term and long term debt. Short term debt is defined as debt which is repayable within a period of 3 or 4 months. When we are taking loan from bank, we should return back. If short term is debt which is repayable within period of 3 or 4 months, that must be paid within a year. The long term loans are repayable generally after a period of year and bear high rate of interest for long term. Next, voluntary and compulsory. Voluntary debt is defined as debt which is paid without any legal enforcement. Public is free to subscribe to such debt, whereas compulsory debt are those debt which are forcibly enforced by the government and hence are involuntary. Though rare debt are raised during war, calamity and emergencies. Next, marketable and non-marketable debt. Marketable debt are the securities that are negotiated in open market. For example, securities sold in the secondary market. Non-marketable loans are the securities that cannot be sold in the open market. For example, Provident Fund, NSA, National Security. So, marketable and non-marketable are marketable debt are securities that are negotiated in the open market. Securities sold in the secondary market. The non-marketable are securities cannot be sold in open market. For example, PF, Provident Fund, and NSA. Then some burden for the public debt to the government. What are the burden of public debt? The concept of burden of public debt has been source of debate among various economists. According to Buchanan, in 1958, the primary real burden of public debt falls into future generation. Since payment of tax is a burden itself, debt financing postpones the levy of tax to the future generation. If government is taking now, but its burden will surely it will goes to future government. Likewise, so it will affect future society, future generation. That is the opinion of Buchanan. Then Bowen Davis Koff in 1960 argued public debt reduced the amount available for private consumption by the community at a time of borrowed funds are used, and thus it affects present consumption expenditure. If government taking debt from private investment, private individuals, so these private individuals giving money to government and thereby their present consumption expenditure is reducing. Then according to Modigliani, burden thesis, he argued in 1961 public debt whether raised internally or externally is advantageous to the generation present at the time of increase and will pose burden on future generation through reduction in the stock of capital. Modigliani also argued that the benefit goes to present generation but burden goes to future generation. Then gross burden of public debt on the future generation can be measured by the interest charged on it. In the future, near future, when we are taking loan from bank, in the near future we should pay high rate of interest. Similarly, in the case of public debt also, this burden can be reduced if rise in debt is accompanied with increase in government expenditure to finance productive capital formation. If these debt money are used for the productive capital formation, then we can repay the amount in a good manner. Then burden of internal debt. First, direct monetary burden. In case of the internal debt, there is transfer of resource from one agent to another, from the hands of public to government. Whenever government has to pay off its debt, it raises tax to generate a fund. So, when government taking internal debt to recover that problem, government will raise the tax rate. It poses additional tax burden on the future generation. Increase in tax can lead to production disposable income and private consumption expenditure. So it totally affects the future generation. Then indirect monetary burden also for internal debt. The loans raised by the government leads to creation of additional demand for goods and service, and in case of supply shortage can lead to higher prices. The loans raised by the government leads to creation of additional demand for goods and service. In case of supply of shortage can lead to higher prices. Then direct real burden, it refers to burden borne by the society due to sacrifice of economic welfare and stresses the taxpayer. Debt incurred to finance unproductive activities can lead to serious loss of socio-economic welfare. Then indirect real burden. Higher tax imposed by the government reduce disposable income and discourage the taxpayers to work hard for higher income. Then it also discourage private investment. So for the internal debt, direct monetary burden, indirect monetary burden, then direct real burden, because burden borne by the society due to sacrifice of economic welfare due to of the taxpayer, very stress for taxpayer. Then debt incurred to finance unproductive activities lead to serious loss of socio-economic welfare also. Then indirect real burden means higher tax imposed by the government reduce disposable income and discourage taxpayer to work hard. Then similarly it discourage private investment. Then burden of external debt. Repayment and servicing creates so much burden. It also direct monetary burden. Higher debt associated debt servicing implies greater burden on the debtor country. So to repay the debt it has serious risk. So should have to pay some greater burden. Then direct real burden. External debt causes loss of economic welfare of the citizen of the debtor country. The present generation, similarly future generation also affect. Then indirect monetary and real burden. This is in turn affect domestic production, consumption and allocation of resource. Because government work hard to strive for repay the debt, but at the same time it affect the country's domestic production, consumption and the allocation of resources. Then debt trap. Countries, especially developing and undeveloped ones, are heavily dependent on external borrowings for their development and non-developmental programs. Moreover, they find it difficult to service their debt out of their own resource and in turn borrow more to repay their loans. So countries, especially developing countries like India, underdeveloped ones also heavily dependent on external borrowing for their development and non-developmental programs. Moreover, they find it difficult to service their debt out of their own resources and in turn borrow more to repay their loan. Then unproductive foreign debt, that is external debt which is incurred for unproductive purpose, will pose greater burden and involve greater economic sacrifice on the debtor nation. Burden on foreign exchange reserve. As mentioned earlier, servicing of external debt require foreign exchange, so we have to pay too much money. Then domination by creditor country. A creditor country poses restriction on the debtor country, especially if it is a small underdeveloped one. So now we have to pay so much debt to World Bank. So the World Bank is the creditor. We are the debtor. So we have facing so many restrictions from the World Bank. Now we finished our third chapter. Okay, thank you.